My son sent me a message at 11:42 p.m. It read, "Don't come to our house anymore. We want peace." I stared at the glowing screen in the dark, then at the checkbook sitting on my desk. They wanted peace. I accepted their peace quietly. I didn't call. I didn't argue. I simply turned off the lights. But the next morning, he knocked on my door with an invoice in his hand. He thought I was an ATM machine with a heartbeat. He forgot I was also the engineer who built the foundation he was standing on. Before I tell you how I evicted my own son from his perfect life, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Hit subscribe if you believe respect is a two-way street. I'm Victor Pierce, 62 years old. For 40 years, I worked as a structural engineer. My job was to calculate loads, stress points, and breaking thresholds. I built bridges that could withstand hurricanes and skyscrapers that could survive earthquakes. But I failed to see the structural fractures in my own home until the roof was already collapsing on my head. It was a Tuesday night. The house was quiet, the kind of silence that feels heavy when you live alone. I was in the garage, the smell of sawdust and varnish filling the air. I was fixing a small wooden bookshelf for my grandson. Tommy, he had turned 8 last week, and he loved dinosaurs. I wanted to surprise him. I was sanding down a rough edge on the top shelf when my phone buzzed on the workbench. It vibrated against the wood, a harsh, intrusive sound that cut through the peaceful quiet of my workshop. I wiped the sawdust from my hands and picked it up. It was a text from Nelson, my only son, the boy I had raised alone after his mother passed away 2 decades ago. The message was short, brutal, like a knife between the ribs. "Dad, Beverly and I have talked. You come over too much. It's overwhelming. We need space to be a family without you hovering. Don't come to the house anymore unless you're specifically invited. We want peace." I read it twice, then a third time. I waited for the follow-up text, the one that said "just kidding" or "sorry, wrong number." But the screen just went black, leaving me staring at my own reflection in the dark glass. I stood there in the cold garage, my hands still rough from the sandpaper. The smell of wood stain and old motor oil surrounded me like a familiar blanket. I thought about the last time I visited their place on Oak Creek Drive. It was 2 days ago, Sunday afternoon. I had brought over a bag of organic apples because I knew Beverly liked juicing. I had fixed the leaking faucet in their kitchen because Nelson didn't know how to use a wrench properly. I played with Tommy for 20 minutes while they sat on their phones, scrolling through social media. I didn't think I was hovering. I thought I was being a father. I thought I was being a grandfather. I looked at the wooden shelf I'd been working on for 3 weeks. Every joint was perfect, every surface smooth. It was built to last, something that could hold weight without breaking. Unlike some things in my life, apparently. I carefully placed the sandpaper down on my workbench. I didn't throw the phone against the concrete wall. I didn't scream at the empty garage. Engineers don't scream. We analyze the data. We look at the structural integrity, and we make decisions based on facts, not emotions. I walked into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. The house felt even quieter now, if that was possible. On the refrigerator, held up by a magnet from Tony's Pizza Palace, was a calendar. I looked at tomorrow's date, the 15th. The 15th was always an expensive day in my household. It was the day the automatic transfer went through for Tommy's private school tuition at Riverside Academy. $2,200 a month automatically deducted from my checking account. It was also the day I wrote the check for the mortgage on the house Nelson and Beverly lived in. Technically, the house belonged to the Pierce Family Trust, a legal entity I had set up with my attorney years ago for tax purposes. But Nelson and Beverly called it their house to everyone who would listen. They painted the walls whatever colors they wanted. They chose the expensive curtains and the designer furniture. They planted the hydrangeas and installed the marble countertops. I just paid the bills, all of them. We want peace. The words echoed in the empty kitchen like a death sentence. They wanted the peace of my absence, but they certainly didn't want the peace that would come with my financial withdrawal. They wanted me gone, but they wanted my wallet to stay. I sat down at the kitchen table where I had eaten breakfast alone for the past 20 years. I picked up my phone and typed a reply. I didn't write a paragraph about how much I loved them. I didn't remind them of the sacrifices I had made or the college tuition I had paid. I didn't mention the down payment for their house or the countless emergencies I had bailed them out of. I just typed 2 words, understood, done. I hit send and watched the message disappear into the digital void. Then I went upstairs, turned off all the lights, and lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The shadows from the street lamp outside danced across the plaster, creating patterns that reminded me of stress fractures in concrete. I didn't sleep. I was calculating. I was looking at the load-bearing walls of my relationship with my son, examining the foundation, checking for structural weaknesses, and I realized there was nothing holding it up anymore except my money. The emotional support beams had rotted away years ago. The respect had crumbled. All that was left was the financial scaffolding, and they had just told me they didn't want that either. At least they didn't want the man attached to it. The next morning came with the pale gray light of a Seattle dawn. Rain streaked down the windows like tears. I made coffee, black, no sugar, the way I had every morning for 40 years. I was sitting in my leather armchair reading the Wall Street Journal when I heard a knock at the front door. It was a rapid, impatient knock, the kind that says the person on the other side has places to be and problems to solve. I checked my watch, 7:15 a.m. I opened the door, and there stood Nelson. He looked stressed, his hair slightly messed up, his tie not quite straight. He was wearing his navy blue suit, the expensive one I had bought him for his promotion interview at Thompson & Associates this last year. He didn't look like a man who had sent a text effectively disowning his father 8 hours earlier. He looked like a man in a hurry, a man with an agenda. "Hey, Dad," he said, stepping inside without waiting for me to invite him in. "Do you have coffee? I'm running late." I watched him walk into my kitchen like he owned the place. He knew where everything was. He opened the cabinet, took out his favorite mug, the blue one with the company logo on it, and poured himself a cup from my pot. He acted as if nothing had happened, as if the text message was just a bad dream I had imagined. He took a sip and grimaced. "You really need to buy better beans, Dad. This tastes like mud. Have you considered getting one of those fancy espresso machines? Beverly has been looking at them online." I closed the front door slowly, deliberately. The click of the lock seemed unusually loud in the morning quiet. I walked into the kitchen and leaned against the counter. My arms crossed, I didn't speak. I just looked at him. I looked at his expensive haircut, perfectly styled even at 7:15 in the morning. I looked at the Rolex on his wrist, the one he had bought with his Christmas bonus 2 years ago. I looked at his manicured nails and his Italian leather shoes. I looked for a sign of remorse, for an acknowledgement of what had happened the night before. I looked for an apology. There was nothing. He put the mug down on my counter and pulled a folded piece of paper from his inside jacket pocket. The paper crinkled as he smoothed it out, a sound like breaking glass in the tense silence of my kitchen. "Look, about the text last night," he said, waving his hand dismissively like he was shooing away a fly. "Don't be dramatic about it. Beverly is just stressed. She feels like she can't relax in her own home when guests are over. We just need boundaries. You understand boundaries, right?" Guests. I was a guest in the house I paid for, in the house where my grandson slept, in the house that existed because of my signature on a mortgage document. "I understand boundaries," I said. My voice was calm, steady, the same tone I used when explaining to clients why their building design wouldn't work. "Good," Nelson said, relief flooding his voice. He smoothed the paper out on my kitchen table with the practiced movements of someone who had done this dance many times before. "Anyway, bad timing with all this, but the transmission on the SUV is acting up. I took it to the mechanic yesterday afternoon. It's the gearbox, apparently. Some kind of internal damage." He slid the paper toward me across the wooden surface. It was an invoice from Precision Auto, the BMW dealership on the north side of town. The letterhead was crisp and professional, the kind that screamed expensive before you even looked at the numbers. "They won't release the car until the invoice is paid." Nelson continued, checking his phone while he talked. "And my credit card is maxed out because of that vacation we booked to Cabo for next month. Beverly found this amazing resort online, all-inclusive ocean view suites." I looked down at the paper. The total at the bottom was $2,400 for a transmission repair on a car that was only 3 years old. "I need you to handle this, Dad," he said, his tone casual, matter of fact. "I have a client meeting at 9 and I can't drive the rental to Thompson & Associates. It's a beat-up Corolla. It looks unprofessional. You know how important image is in my business." He didn't ask. He didn't say please or if you don't mind or I'd really appreciate it. He commanded. He expected. He assumed that my wallet was an extension of his wallet, that my money was his money, that my problems were his solutions. I looked at the invoice, then back at my son. For 35 years, I had smoothed every bump in his road. When he crashed his bike at age 7, I bought him a new one. When he failed algebra in high school, I hired a tutor. When he got a DUI in college, I paid for the lawyer. When he graduated with a business degree and couldn't find a job, I made some calls to old contacts in the construction industry. When he wanted to propose to Beverly, I helped him pick out the ring and co-sign the loan. I paid for the wedding, a $40,000 affair at the Harbor Club with 200 guests who drank expensive champagne and ate overpriced salmon. I bought them the house as a wedding gift, putting it in the family trust for tax purposes. I paid for the furniture, the landscaping, the security system. When Beverly got pregnant, I paid for the private health care and the nursery renovation. I thought I was helping him build a life. I thought I was being a good father, the kind of father I wished I had growing up, but I wasn't building anything. I was crippling him, one check at a time. I had turned my son into a man who could insult his father at midnight and demand money at dawn without seeing any contradiction in his behavior. I walked over to the drawer where I kept my checkbook. I could feel Nelson's eyes on me, tracking my movement across the kitchen. I could feel his relief, the tension leaving his shoulders. He thought the crisis was over. He thought the boundaries we had discussed were simple. I stay away from the house, but my money stays close and available. I pulled out the checkbook, a leather-bound book that had seen thousands of transactions over the years. I took my fountain pen from my shirt pocket. It was a Mont Blanc, a retirement gift from Pierce Engineering, heavy and elegant in my hand. The weight of it reminded me of all the important documents I had signed over the years, all the contracts and blueprints and specifications that had built my reputation. Thanks, Dad. You're a lifesaver. Seriously, Beverly was freaking out about the car. She needs it for her yoga class and her book club meetings. We'll bring Tommy over in a couple of weeks, maybe once things settle down and Beverly feels more comfortable with the new arrangement. A couple of weeks, maybe. Conditional access to my own grandson dependent on his mother's comfort level. I opened the checkbook to a fresh page. The paper was crisp and white, waiting for my decision. I wrote the date in the upper right corner, March 16th. I wrote Precision Auto on the payee line in my careful engineer's handwriting. I wrote out the amount, $2,400 and Fivry 100. I signed my name at the bottom, Victor Pierce. The signature was bold and clear, a name that had meant something in this city for 4 decades. I looked at the check. It was perfect, a small piece of paper that represented safety, security, a problem solved with money instead of effort. It represented the easy way out, the path of least resistance. I tore the check out of the book. The perforated edge separated with a sharp ripping sound that seemed unnaturally loud in the quiet kitchen. Nelson reached out his hand expectantly. He was already moving toward the door, already thinking about his client meeting, already planning his day around the assumption that his problems had been solved by someone else's money. Great, I got to run, he said. His hand extended, fingers already curling in anticipation of receiving the check. I held the check in my left hand, looking down at it. $2,400 in the grand scheme of my finances, it was nothing. Pocket change, I spent more than that on property taxes for their house every month. But this piece of paper represented something much bigger than a car repair. It represented a choice, a crossroads, a moment where I could either continue down the same path I had been walking for 35 years or change direction entirely. I looked up at my son. He was checking his phone again, scrolling through emails with his thumb, already mentally at his office, already planning his day around the assumption that his problem had been solved. You said you wanted peace, Nelson. Yeah, Dad, I know. Let's not rehash it. Just give me the check so I can get going. I smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It wasn't the indulgent smile of a father who had been caught doing something silly. It was the cold, calculating smile of an engineer who had finally identified the source of a structural failure. Peace is expensive, son, I said. Then, with 2 slow, deliberate movements, I tore the check in half. The sound was crisp and final. I put the 2 halves together and tore them again, creating 4 pieces. Then I tore those pieces again, creating confetti. Nelson froze. His hand was still outstretched, hovering in the air like he was reaching for something that had suddenly vanished. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked at the confetti of blue and white paper falling from my fingers onto the linoleum floor of my kitchen, each piece spiraling down like snow. Dad, he whispered. What are you doing? I'm respecting your boundaries, I said calmly. You want to be a separate family. You want to be independent. You want distance from me. I'm giving you all of that. Are you crazy? He shouted, his voice cracking with panic. His face turned red, the color starting at his neck and spreading upward like spilled wine. I need my car. I have a meeting. This is a $2,400 repair bill. You can't just tear up a check like that. That's a problem for the man who owns the car, I said. And since you want to be the man of your own house, you're the man who pays for his own transmission. You're punishing me, he spat out, pointing an accusing finger at my chest. This is petty. This is childish. Just because we asked for some privacy, you're going to sabotage my career. I'm not punishing you, I said, my voice getting quieter as his got louder. I'm retiring. I'm retiring from the job of being your bank. I pointed toward the front door. Get out of my house, Nelson. He stood there for a moment, his fists clenched at his sides, breathing hard through his nose. He looked down at the torn paper scattered across my floor, then back up at me. He was searching my eyes, looking for the joke, looking for the moment when I would laugh and say gotcha and write him another check. But he saw something in my expression he had never seen before. He saw the end of the line. He saw the bridge burning behind him. Fine, he sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. Be a bitter old man, see if we ever invite you over again. Beverly was right about you. You are selfish and manipulative. You're not going to see Tommy until you apologize for this. You're not going to be part of his life until you learn how to respect boundaries. He turned and stormed toward the front door, his expensive shoes clicking against the hardwood floor. He grabbed the brass handle and yanked it open so hard that it banged against the wall, leaving a small dent in the drywall. "Don't come crawling back when you realize you need us more than we need you," he shouted over his shoulder as he walked out. The door slammed behind him with enough force to rattle the windows. The sound echoed through the house like a gunshot, followed by the immediate profound silence that comes after an explosion. I stood in my kitchen surrounded by the debris of our relationship. The torn pieces of the check looked like flower petals scattered across the floor. I knelt down and picked them up, one by one, depositing them in the trash can under the sink. The silence that filled the house wasn't the heavy, oppressive silence I had lived with for 20 years. It was different. It was clean. It felt like the dust settling after a controlled demolition, the moment when the smoke clears and you can see exactly what you're left with. I looked at the calendar on the refrigerator again, the 15th. Today was the day that everything changed. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I needed. Patterson and Associates, Gloria Patterson speaking, came the crisp professional voice on the other end. "Gloria, it's Victor Pierce. Is everything okay? It's 7:45 in the morning. Everything's fine, Gloria," I said, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. "I need an appointment today. Emergency meeting. I need to make some changes to the Pierce Family Trust, specifically regarding the residency clause for the property on Oak Creek Drive." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Gloria had been my attorney for 15 years. She had handled my wife's estate, set up the family trust, managed all of my legal affairs. She was smart, experienced, and she understood immediately what I was talking about. "Are you sure about this, Victor?" she asked softly. "Once we start this process, it's very difficult to stop. There are legal implications, financial implications, family implications." I looked at the space where my son had been standing just minutes before. I could still smell his cologne in the air, still see the indentation in the carpet where his feet had been planted while he demanded my money. "I'm sure," I said. "They wanted peace, Gloria. I'm going to give them exactly what they asked for." The next 7 days were the quietest of my adult life. For the first time in 20 years, my phone didn't ring with emergencies. There were no texts about broken appliances. No panic calls about late credit card payments, no guilt trips about how other grandfathers bought their families vacations to Europe. There was just silence, and it was magnificent. I woke up each morning at 6 a.m. not because I was anxious about Nelson's latest crisis, but because the sun was hitting the rhododendrons in my backyard just right. I made my coffee and sat on the back porch, watching the steam rise from my mug and dissolve into the cool Seattle air. For the first time in decades, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. Meanwhile, Gloria Patterson had been busy. The legal machinery was already in motion. Documents were being prepared, notices were being drafted, and the structural demolition of my son's entitled lifestyle was proceeding according to plan. It was Friday afternoon when the silence finally broke. I was in my living room, organizing my collection of jazz vinyl records, when my phone rang. The screen showed a photo of Tommy, my grandson, smiling and missing his front tooth. For a moment, my heart jumped, thinking he had somehow gotten hold of a phone. But then I saw the name underneath the photo, Beverly. I let it ring 3 times before answering. I wanted to be calm, collected, in control. "Hello," I said. "Hi, Dad." Beverly's voice was artificially bright, practically vibrating with forced cheerfulness. It was the voice she used when she wanted something expensive, the voice of a salesperson closing a deal. "Hello, Beverly. So we haven't heard from you all week," she continued, breezing past any acknowledgement of what had happened. "We were getting a little worried, with your blood pressure and everything. We just wanted to make sure you were okay." "I'm fine," I said. "My blood pressure has actually been excellent this week." "Oh, that's wonderful. Listen, the reason I'm calling is that we're finalizing the plans for Tommy's birthday party next Saturday. Can you believe he's going to be 8 time flies so fast?" We decided to go with a space theme this year. We rented out the Galaxy Zone at the Westfield Mall. The one with the laser tag and the arcade games. "It's going to be amazing." She paused, waiting for me to get sentimental, to coo about my grandson growing up. I remained silent. "Anyway," she pressed on, her cheerfulness straining slightly at the edges. "Here's the thing. The deposit is due today and the catering bill has to be paid up front. Since you usually handle the birthday budget as your special gift to Tommy, I just wanted to make sure you were sending the transfer today. We were thinking $5,000 this year. The venue is more exclusive and we want to get him that new PlayStation console he's been asking for. $5,000. She asked for it as casually as if she were asking me to pass the salt. "I have already taken care of Tommy's gift," I said calmly. There was a pause. I could hear her tapping on a keyboard in the background, probably checking their bank account online. "Oh," she said, her voice dropping an octave. "I'm looking at our Wells Fargo account right now, Dad. I don't see a transfer. Did you send it to Nelson's personal account?" I didn't send it to any account, I said. Beverly's mask of sweetness finally slipped. Okay, Victor, stop playing games. Where's the money? You promised Tommy a good birthday? Are you really going to punish an 8-year-old boy because you had a disagreement with Nelson? I'm not punishing Tommy, I said, leaning back in my armchair. I put $10,000 into a $529 education savings plan in his name this morning. Absolute silence. Then what? A $529 plan. It's a tax-advantaged investment account for future education costs. The money is locked away, growing with compound interest until he turns 18. It can only be used for college tuition, books, or vocational training. But that doesn't help us now, she shrieked. We need the money for the party. We already invited everyone. Then you should pay for the party, I said. You and Nelson have jobs, your parents. Parents pay for parties. Grandfathers invest in futures. What followed was 10 minutes of screaming, threats, and emotional manipulation that would have made a professional extortionist proud. Beverly called me selfish, bitter, and vindictive. She threatened to keep Tommy away from me forever. She accused me of ruining her son's childhood. I hung up and immediately called my bank to put a freeze on all automatic transfers. Saturday arrived with perfect weather for a party. While I sat on my porch reading Theodore Roosevelt's biography, 5 miles away my son and daughter-in-law were hosting their social event in the backyard I had paid to landscape, but their perfect day was about to be interrupted. At exactly 2:30 p.m., just as the party was hitting its peak, a white FedEx truck pulled up to their house. The driver walked to the front door carrying a large, rigid envelope marked "You are gent, signature required." I wasn't there to see it, but I could imagine the scene. Nelson, wearing his ridiculous grill master apron, signing for a package he assumed was a late birthday gift. Beverly holding court with her friends, pausing her conversation to watch her husband tear open the envelope. The first document was a formal notice on cream-colored legal stationery. Notice to quit, 30 days to vacate the premises. The second document was even worse. Notice of intent to sell. The house was going on the market. A photographer would arrive Monday morning. The third document was the promissory note for their kitchen renovation stamped in red ink, Diaple, $40,000, due immediately. That evening, around 11:30 p.m., I heard the sound of an engine in my driveway. Angry footsteps on my front porch, pounding on my door. Open up. Nelson's voice was raw, desperate. Open this door right now. I took my time walking to the front door. When I opened it, they looked like refugees from their own life. Nelson was soaking wet from the rain, his expensive shirt clinging to his chest. Beverly stood behind him, mascara running down her cheeks in dark streaks. "You're insane," Nelson shouted, pushing past me into my hallway. "Do you know what you did? We had to end the party. We had to lie to everyone. Do you know how humiliating that was? I know exactly what I did." I said, "I sent legal notices. I assume you received them." What followed was an hour of threats, pleading, and desperate bargaining. They offered to pay me back. They promised to respect boundaries. They swore they had learned their lesson, but I had heard it all before, and I was done believing in temporary reforms. By midnight, they were gone. The house was quiet again. 3 weeks later, Nelson came back, but this time he was walking. No car, no expensive suit. He looked thinner, wearing jeans and a faded polo shirt. He had been working at Harold Murphy's dock crew, hauling steel cables for $18 an hour. "I wanted to say I'm sorry," he said from the bottom of my porch steps. "Not for the money, not for the car, but for the way I treated you." I looked at him, searching for the lie, but I didn't see it this time. I saw exhaustion, humility, and something that might have been wisdom. "I accept your apology," I said. "He asked for help getting an apartment, but I handed him a different kind of help. A job application for better work if he wanted to earn it. I'm Victor Pierce. I'm a builder. And today I finally laid the first brick of a foundation that might actually last. Thank you for listening to my story. Sometimes love means saying no. Sometimes the best gift you can give someone is the chance to stand on their own 2 feet. Until next time. Remember, the strongest foundations are built not with money, but with consequences. When you remove the safety net, you force people to grow wings. True wealth isn't what you can give your children. It's what you teach them they can earn for themselves. The greatest inheritance is self-respect.